Hello. Today I wanted to go over some of the reasons for depersonalization and derealization to give people insight to how they can treat this awful condition and how they can come out of it and come back to being normal again. So these reasons that I've got are from my own experience. There might be other reasons for it, but I haven't found anything, and these are pretty obscure. Like, a lot of people may not have thought of these. I know I didn't think of my root cause until 9 months into the hellhole, and some of them are hard to believe as well, but trust me, if you get tests and trial a few things and it doesn't work, it's not going to bring any harm to you. So it's worth looking into, definitely. Like, it's totally saved my life. So the reason today I'll talk about is heavy metal toxicity, because this is what I believe is probably one of the big main reasons for it. It's the reason why people have been stuck in this state for years, because unless you treat heavy metal toxicity in the right way, it's just gonna stay in your body. And it's not just about, like, you know, eating healthy and exercising and detoxing. You have to do a specific set of things to rid yourself of certain metals. So I will go over the other metals, what you could be heavy metal toxic with, but I'll leave the main one till last. So copper is a common metal that can be found in the human body. It's a mineral, but an imbalance of copper to zinc can cause depersonalization. This has happened to me when I was 21. I had the copper IUD in for about a year, so that's the power of God, and I experienced depression and fibromyalgia and low mood and depersonalization as well. It wasn't as severe as this sort of time, because the body can kind of process copper better than it can other things. So it wasn't as prominent, but it still had a definite effect on my mental health. So the way to balance copper out is actually taking zinc supplements, because copper and zinc are two yin and yang of the same thing. So the more zinc you take, the more your copper will reduce, or it'll balance it out, the ratio, so you won't feel the effects of excess copper in the body. You have to be careful when starting to take zinc sometimes, because you can have a kind of a dump from the copper, so your symptoms may worsen for a little while before they get better. So it's best off to just start slow. Generally, you would take around 50 milligrams of zinc when you are trying to detox from copper, but you would work your way up from, like, 20 milligram and then keep going up. Zinc is a pretty good mineral to have in the body anyway, so it's not gonna have adverse effects on its own. But if you are loaded with copper, it'll be the copper that'll cause the effects, so just go slow with it. Lead is another heavy metal that you can be poisoned with, and it's quite common in younger children, because, well, it's not as common nowadays, because they used to use lead paint in the walls, and sometimes there can be a lead in your water supply, but it's less prominent now because we have, more modern things. Lead poisoning can cause an array of symptoms. It's known to lower IQ in people and make them quite docile. But the method of getting rid of lead is the same as other metals, so I'll go through that in the end. So the main one that you want to think about is mercury, and I've discussed this in other videos, but I really want to kind of go into it in detail, and kind of share my knowledge on it, and I guess sell it, because it's not really a common thing to be poisoned with mercury as people would think, but it actually happens quite often. So if you have, and listen to this carefully because I promise you this is a valid statement, because it was applicable for me and I feel like it's applicable for, I would estimate, around 50% of people who suffer with depersonalization. This relates to them. If you have silver fillings, they're called silver fillings, but they're actually 50% mercury. These are the dark, almost black colour, grey fillings in your mouth. If you have those, and depersonalization, the chances are you are loaded with mercury, and the mercury is causing the depersonalization. These fillings, so they are pretty toxic to the human body. They were basically originated in the 1800s and they've been in operation ever since. You know, the National Health Services use them because it's a durable metal. It's a mixture of mercury, which is 50%, and the other metals are tin, silver and aluminium, I believe, and zinc. There's a mixture of other things, but the main element there is mercury. Every time you chew something, or you drink a hot beverage, or you grind your teeth, there is vapour being released from those fillings, and the vapour actually moves its way around your body and into your brain. The mercury can cross the blood-brain barrier, so it can circulate the body and settle in the brain. That obviously causes a massive array of symptoms. And the good news is, if you suffer with depersonalization and you suffer with other health problems, which you feel like they might be linked, you know, especially memory problems and confusion, mental health problems. So, you know, it can be anything from bipolar, schizophrenia, psychosis, anxiety, depression, fatigue, if you have fatigue and chronic fatigue. Also stomach issues is a big one that is a telltale sign of mercury poisoning, as well as the depersonalization. There's two other symptoms that are quite obvious. You've got tinnitus. Is it tinnitus? I don't know how the Americans in the UK pronounce it, but ringing in the ears is a big factor of mercury poisoning. And also, if you ever have a metal taste in your mouth as well. You don't have to have all of these symptoms to, you know, feel like it's valid, but these are the symptoms that go hand in hand with mercury poisoning. Not everyone who's mercury toxic has depersonalization, but they kind of call it brain fog or feeling drunk. So it's kind of subjective, really. So mercury can come from amalgam fillings. It can also come from fish. So if you eat a lot of tuna and sushi, those are probably the highest level of mercury. There will be others, you know, crab, but the more common ones are tuna. And also, if your mother had amalgam fillings when you were conceived or when you were in the womb, then the chances are she's passed some of that mercury in her system down to you. 30% of a mother's mercury in her body goes into the fetus, therefore you're born with mercury poisoning. And it's not like a massive mercury poisoning like in a way of like food poisoning. It just means that you have mercury in your body, because there is no safe level of mercury in a person's body. Mercury is the second most toxic chemical element on the periodic table. Okay, and dentists are placing this element in people's mouths inches away from the brain. I believe that these fillings will be banned in a couple of years' time. They've already banned them in places like Sweden, I believe North Europe countries, because they've just basically ruled that they are not safe in a person's body. some people don't react as badly as others to metal in the mouth because they have genetics that can kind of deal with that mercury and detox it from the body. But there is another thing I want to go into in another video, but I'll briefly mention it. There is a gene, everyone has an MTHFR variation. So 40% of people have a variation that enables the body to store heavy metals in the body and not rid them of them. So 40% of the population basically have a mutation of a gene which on its own is okay, but it impairs the detox pathways. So any metal that you come in contact with, particularly from your amalgam fillings, is stored in the body gradually, and then it basically accumulates to a point where it starts showing symptoms. So for us it's depersonalization, unfortunately. So that means that we have to kind of manually rid ourselves of mercury. If you remember being depersonalized as a child, or maybe when you were a baby, I think in my theory that there was a chance that mercury poisoning was a factor then, because like I say, you can be born with mercury in the body from the mother. If your mum doesn't have amalgams, her mum, if she had amalgams, could have passed it on to her, and she could have passed it on to you at a low level, but it is a very strong possibility. So the only way, I'll go into testing for this. Testing is quite difficult because blood tests aren't accurate. Mercury only stays in the blood for around 3 days after the first initial exposure. So unless you've ingested some mercury or breathed it in from like a chemical power plant or something, or like a sort of worker's mine, then you won't show up with mercury in your body. Urine, again, will only show up mercury if it has been provoked to come out of the cells, which I'll explain in more detail. The most accurate way to test for mercury is by a hair analysis. However, this doesn't indicate how much mercury is in the body. It only indicates whether or not it's there. So, hair analysis tests. I will leave a link in this video to where you can get one done, where I got mine done from. There's a company in the UK, there's also one in the US. I will also leave a link to the Cutlers Chelation page on Facebook. This is the one that I've trusted and followed from day one. If you don't agree with their treatment, that's absolutely fine. Like I'm not being, a salesperson, or I'm not trying to convince you to follow this protocol. It's entirely up to you what you do. It's just what has worked for me and what I recommend for depersonalization. I'm not saying other things won't work, but there is risks with other things which I'll go into. So if you get a hair mineral test, you are basically looking for signs of mercury poisoning. It will show up the mercury in the hair, but if you store mercury in your body and don't detox it, then it's unlikely to show at a very high level in your hair because you're not pushing it out of your body. A lot of it is stored in the brain. It can be stored in every organ of your body. For me, it was my brain, and also my adrenals were quite bad. And then there was things like my thyroid. It's a common thing to have hypo and hyperthyroidism with mercury poisoning. So you want to bear that in mind as well. So basically, you're looking for elements in the body that are depleted. So for me, I had very low potassium, very low iodine, and magnesium. There was a lot of elements that were in the red, and there is rules to check hair tests, which you will find on the Cutlers page. So basically, you have to meet certain conditions to be able to be likely of being mercury poisoned. there is 4 different rules. So you look at your elements and look at the ratio of those, and it needs to be analysed. If you do get a hair test, make sure you get it analysed by the Andy Cutlers page on Facebook. Post the results there, because there is professionals who will analyse that for you and let you know what your likelihood of mercury toxicity is. Because a lot of times people have looked at the results and the mercury bar's been so small, they've been like, no, mercury's not it, and they've missed the point completely. My bar wasn't massive, it wasn't like, it was there, but it didn't indicate the amount I had in my body, but my other minerals did. So you want to bear that in mind. Even a tiny amount of mercury showing up in your hair is a bad sign anyway, because you don't want any of that in your body. So if you are a sensitive person and you have a tiny bit of mercury in your body, you can still experience chronic depersonalization. So what to do? If you have mercury toxicity, you need to follow very particular steps. And mercury is a very dangerous thing to be dealing with willy-nilly. If you move it around the body, it can make you seriously ill. I'm not saying this to scare you, but I need to warn you, because you can cause, more damage. You don't want to be worse than you are. And depersonalization, I feel like it can vary on severity. I feel like you do have it or you don't have it, but there is like some days where I was kind of really bad, couldn't leave my room, couldn't even look up. Those are the days where I could go out and function and kind of just ignore it. So you are putting yourself at risk at making it quite severe if you do the wrong thing. The most important thing is, if you have fillings that are amalgams, you need to get them removed by a holistic dentist who is specialised in the SMART protocol. So what this means is, these are private dentists, and unfortunately it's going to cost money to do it. Mine cost around £400 here in the UK, and I had 2, and that was including the consultation as well. So it's a small price to pay for my freedom in my health, in my life. But if you don't have that kind of money, it can be frustrating, especially if you have a lot of fillings as well. It's per filling. But I'm assuming you've already spent a lot of money and time looking for answers. So hopefully this will save you some more effort. So you have to have your amalgams removed by a professional holistic dentist. They use all of the precautions needed. They use like a rubber dam. They put oxygen on your nose. They cover you with the material to protect you. So you're basically not getting exposed, because if you go to a regular dentist and start just getting them drilled out, you're basically sanding off all the mercury and the vapour, breathing it all in. It's just going to settle in your body and make you more ill. So this professional smart dentist will ensure that there is minimal exposure. There will still be slight exposure, but it's worth going through 1 or 2 weeks of feeling a bit crap again to then feeling better, and having this for the rest of your life. Because I think if you have depersonalization and you have fillings and mercury is your problem, it isn't going to go away until you get the fillings removed, at least. And I'm sorry to say, and it sounds like, what am I going to do then? But there is hope now. I just feel bad for those people who have root canals and fillings and the mouth loaded with mercury, because it may take some time, but you've already spent this amount of time feeling the way you do, so a little bit longer isn't gonna, and especially when you have hope, it isn't gonna make things worse. So once you've had your amalgams removed, you need to make sure there is no specks. So you need bite wing x-rays, which again is on the Andy Cutler page. All the descriptions, the wonderful admins there have put together a step-by-step guide on how to rid yourself of mercury. And again, you don't have to follow this if you don't want to, or if you don't believe it'll work for you. There is other things out there, but I'm just telling you what I know and what's worked for me, and what I feel is right, really. So you have to get bite wings, which basically show the close-up of the molars, and send them off in the Facebook group, and the professional dentist there will look at them, they'll analyse them, make sure there's no little specks. Because if you start what is called chelation, which is detoxing of heavy metals, with a little tiny bit of amalgam in your mouth, or even a filling, it's basically just going to pull the metal from that and circulate it around your body and make you more sick. So it's really important to get that done before you start anything. Then after 4 days of your fillings being removed, you can then start what is called a chelator. So you can start a chelator which is DSMA, or it could be DMSA, I might have to check that, but this is the one I'm taking. You have to have this chelator every 4 hours for 3 days, and then have at least 4 days off. So that's what's known as a round. So basically it keeps your blood levels topped up with the chelator. The chelator basically grabs onto the mercury and pulls it out of the body and flushes it out via, you know, your feces and your urine and your sweat. It's important to take the chelator at night as well. So unfortunately I have to wake up every 4 hours at night time, as well as taking it through the day. For 3 days, but then you have as many days off as you want and then go back on it. This concept is very detailed, there's a lot to go into with it, but if you want to find out more information, I highly recommend you go on this Facebook page, or even Google Andy Cutlers Chelation. There'll be a lot of information there. He has a book on the whole thing which I've bought, Mercury Detoxification Manual, which takes you through step by step on how to get yourself better. It is also important to take what is called the Core 4. So this lowers the toxic burden level in the body. So those are vitamin C, magnesium, zinc and vitamin E. You need to be taking these 2 weeks before you start the chelation process. So I also take, well, honestly, I take 22 supplements per day. That sounds crazy, but I've needed them because I've been so depleted in a lot of things, and I finally found the right doses and the right types for me. I'll go into all that in another video. You will likely feel better when you start taking the supplements because you've been depleted for so long. So it's basically like having a nourishing drink when you've been dehydrated. But you do still need to deal with the mercury in the body. But it is important to take these supplements before that process, because if you start detoxing without support for your liver, your adrenals, your thyroid, your kidneys, your stomach, it's just going to put a heavy burden on the body. So unfortunately, the chelation process can last for a few years. You may need to do this for a few years to rid yourself of the mercury, but you won't be depersonalized for all that time, because the more mercury you move from your brain, the better you'll feel. So you must, the DMSA only removes mercury from the bloodstream and the organs, but not the brain, because it can't cross the blood-brain barrier. There is a chelator called ALA, which I'll be starting in about a month or so's time, because you need to wait 3 months after your fillings are removed before you start the ALA. Because if you start the ALA after the removal, the mercury that's kind of still in high levels in your body will move around in your brain. You don't want to open that door and let it flood in. You want it to come out. So I'll start the ALA, which technically you only need ALA to get better, but the DMSA will lower the burden level in the body. So it sounds pretty complicated and it sounds quite scary, but I have already felt results in myself and feel like once I start the ALA, things will continue to improve. I am going to post chelation diaries on here, so round by round I will keep you updated on how I feel. I start my first round tomorrow on the D chelator. Already I'm feeling a lot better because I've had my amalgams removed. You might find that as well. But if you don't be disheartened, because it's still not out of your brain anyway. It's just the burden level's been lowered. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention as well, other symptoms of mercury poisoning is if you have food intolerances. So if you have issues like chemical sensitivity as well. So, but the mercury can affect the whole body. So basically, if you have any chronic health conditions and depersonalization, or you have, any other symptoms, it's likely that you can't explain. It's likely to be mercury. And the final note to say is, doctors don't acknowledge mercury poisoning as a real thing, which is the most difficult aspect of all this. I believe in a few years' time there will be some kind of change where they do acknowledge it, and they think, scientists will be like, right, we've realised that this is damaging people. Already, the Food and Drugs Association, government sort of authorities have acknowledged mercury amalgam fillings as toxic to certain groups of people. And I will link this in the description, but we have some headway. So we've actually got a government body who kind of now turned around and changed their guidelines on amalgam fillings. They've said don't get them in if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you're sensitive to heavy metals. Doesn't specify how, but many people are sensitive to heavy metals, I think. And if you have mercury poisoning, then you are sensitive to heavy metals. And as well, another thing to note is if you are sensitive to drugs and alcohol, you're likely to be sensitive to heavy metals. If you're just a sensitive person, it'll be your genetics, which you can do things about as well, and I'll go into that in another video. So I hope that covers everything. If you have any questions, just leave them down below in the comment section. But the first thing to do is have a look at the Andy Cutlers chelation guidelines and see what you believe to be true for yourself, and maybe have some testing done and see how you can help yourself. Okay, speak soon.